Asset management. No one really is doing asset management well, and it's extremely hard to get a handle of all the devices that are storing and managing data across your company. So if you manage the IT program for a company with less than 1,000 employees, this video is for you. Often when we start an engagement, we do a risk assessment. We'll start to talk about asset management with the client, and things start to go pretty well and everybody's very confident. And then as we start to push into it a little bit, we find that the story starts to fall apart a little bit. And that happens because it's especially true with asset management. The art of knowing what you have and what you have to protect is very difficult. We often do things very well when we're confident and we're comfortable with what we're doing and we understand the scope of our responsibilities in that area. But I think asset management is one of those areas that we do 90 to 95% of it very well, but that outstanding 5 to 10% introduces an extreme amount of risk. If we forget just a couple assets, one asset out there, it could be a critical exposure to the rest of our data and assets. So we need to do it really well. I grabbed this image from Azure here, and I think it does a good job of, just kind of highlighting some of the risks in asset management. One of the areas that we see a lot is security cameras. Not just security cameras, but the controllers will often be available. They're open on port 80. Recently, we found one with default credentials. And if someone were to log into that controller, they could actually see feeds and make out the pin pad to one of the rooms that was a secure area in a facility. Another area we often see is wireless access points that no one knew about that were stood up. Another area is when partners or vendors will send equipment to a company and they have to install it and put it on their network, maybe for remote maintenance support, or it's a vendor-owned device. That tends to slip through the cracks too. So there's all kinds of opportunity here for assets to be forgotten about. Could be an IT, an OT device, even a mobile device. During one of our recent risk assessments we did for a client, we found a SQL database. It had a public IP address, and that was on the internet, and the data wasn't being encrypted in transit. And so it posed a very large risk. And I don't say this to shame the client at all. That's why they engage with us to do a risk assessment. The point is that we're able to find this not through an exhaustive procedure or not through an expensive penetration test, which are tremendously valuable at the right point. I'm saying that we can find things like that can be a critical exposure to a company by doing a foundational asset management program well. And it's not hard, it's not difficult, and it doesn't take a lot of time. So with that said, let me give you 3 tips to improve your asset management program. Number 1, qualify the assets that you're responsible for managing. And we prepared a worksheet. I'll put a link below. It's free. You don't need to sign up to download it. We didn't put our logo on it. Matter of fact, we created it so you can brand it yourself and you can fill it out. There's a section, I'll put an image up if we can, where you select the types of assets that you're responsible for protecting, and that defines the scope of your asset management program. And I would encourage you that when you're done with this exercise, go and bring it to your leader or your manager and get them to agree that that's the scope of your asset management program. I know cybersecurity people work really hard to protect assets, and sometimes if we don't get that executive alignment, then all your effort is for null. And you don't want to be found being neglectful of an asset. So just bring that, get approval for it, and now you've got a clear mission on what you're responsible for protecting as part of your asset management program. Number 2, scan and compare assets to other asset resources. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, it just seems like when we have machines and we have data, we're deploying software and we're managing them, you can go to one of these platforms and you can export all the devices. So take Azure computers, for example. Go to Azure, download the computers, you can export it into the CSV, and then go to another software program. Think of like your EDR program. Maybe it's SentinelOne, CrowdStrike. You go into host management and click export, and take these two lists and compare. Matter of fact, here's what I'll do. I'll make another video after this one showing our exact process on how we perform asset management and identify rogue assets on networks so that you can follow that process. And number 4, here's a bonus, add this as a governance process. So many of the companies that we work with, companies under 1,000 employees, they don't have a dedicated governance platform or program. So what we do instead is take a task like this and add it either annually, semi-annually, or quarterly to your calendar, to your team calendar, and add several people to that event and label it as a governance task, and just point to your process. Maybe it's this worksheet that you download. Point to that so it gets done regularly and doesn't get forgotten about. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that gets you started building an asset management program as the foundation of your cybersecurity program and helps you identify those rogue assets that could be absolutely critical if forgotten about. Now, if you want, if you want to gauge how good your cybersecurity program is, maybe you're wondering about it, we've prepared 18 questions and a link below. You can take that survey. It'll take you about 2 minutes and you'll get a detailed report on your current cybersecurity maturity. So I hope that's helpful.